Tākiri ko te ata, kōrihi ko te manu, ka ao, ka awatea, tihei Māori. Ko Tom Alesana ahau, te kai hautu o Te Ahu o Te Reo ki Te Tauihu. Ahu ahu tia te whakaaro, ahu ahu tia te kōrero, mai te kore, ki te pō, ki te ao mārama. Going from Kura Kaupapa Māori, from the Kura Kaupapa Māori or Ōtepoti, to a mainstream school, what was that like?
The biggest difference was the numbers for me. That was the first thing I noticed. From a school with 50 to 70 ākonga, and they range from new entrants all the way through to year 13. So that to a kura with 500 to 600 kids with just 2 year levels, that was a huge jump. And then again, the jump in numbers from, all tamariki Māori to a very little percentage or number of tamariki Māori at Waimea Intermediate. So that was probably the first thing I noticed. And then the very, the way that the kura was felt. We were all like whānau at the kura in Ōtepoti. It was tuakana teina all the time. There was no difference. We hung out, boys and girls hung out together. It didn't mean anything. We all played sports together. And going to, mainstream kura where I think the dynamics change a lot and it becomes, bigger numbers, and it was just different. That was probably the biggest and first thing I noticed.
What were some of the language barriers, going from full immersion into just a mainstream school that spoke English?
I think the first thing I noticed was, with the language barrier, was with maths more than the English side. The English side, I was really lucky. I had Auntie Tanya Hippolyte as my kaiako, and I think that was strategic. My brother and whānau had kind of organised that I be with her so that I could have some extra support. And she was, so she kind of mentored me a little bit outside of kura as well to get me up to date with everyone else. But I think that it was things like maths and the other areas where there was a lot more lingo or something that, we didn't really use.
There's terminology.
The terms are really different in maths and science and technology. That was another thing we never did at the kura. We used to go to a kura auraki for technology, so that part wasn't too bad. But yeah, definitely in maths. And I found that I was at the bottom of the barrel. We talk about the cab classes. That's what we used to call them when we were at kura, and I found that I was in the cab classes, but I also felt like I got through quite quickly. I made my way up through quite quickly, but that was probably a struggle. Yeah, just the terminologies and.
But the difference between teaching styles too. Did you find anything? In Kura Kaupapa Māori, there's Te Ahu Matua, and then in mainstream schools, they just have a stock standard sort of curriculum that's run across all schools. But Te Ahu Matua has the ability to be quite bespoke for a particular kura. Did you find anything sort of in terms of teaching styles or the things you were learning different? Yeah,
I think it was probably more when I went to Waimea College, when I went to college, because again I had whānau as a kaiako in my class, so I found that it kind of embodied a lot of the values that I'd kind of gotten from Te Ahu Matua, having Auntie Tanya in the class, which is probably, my kaiako in kura were again just like whānau.
Like an extension.
Yeah, and so the growling, it probably wouldn't seem that appropriate or professional to have a growling like that at a kura auraki, but for us that was, like an auntie.
Or an uncle.
Or an uncle, yeah. And we were really close with all our kaiako as well. So again, I felt really comfortable being in the class with whānau when I went to, I had a really good transition, I think, with her. Waimea College was different, going, because I had 1 year in intermediate, which was a good kind of prep into college. But then, kaiako at college, I think the struggle for them was understanding me and how I kind of worked in the classroom. But at the same time, I also felt like I was quite adaptable. I don't know if that would have been the same for all tamariki. I know my friends from Kura Kaupapa that also left and went into mainstream didn't have the same kind of support. But yeah, the teaching styles, that was probably the biggest difference, was just that extension of who we were from kura to kind of a stranger standing in front of us.
Speaking of college, Ngā Manu Kōrero was a big part of your college life. Tell us about Ngā Manu Kōrero and how you got involved in some of your highlights.
I think the getting involved was almost automatic. It was almost an expectation, and that's something that I've taken away like as an adult now. I kind of think back and think of my tamariki and how hopefully I don't have that same pressure on them. Not that my parents put pressure on me, but it did feel like it was an automatic expectation being from Kura Kaupapa. At a kura, a lot of the teachers were, again, they were like whānau.
Oh, Māori kid, they'll do manu kōrero.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Or like, oh yeah, she'll take it out easy or something. And so I think that kind of pressure was hard. And from other tamariki too, like, oh, I don't want to do it, I'm not going up against you. And that kind of mentality. So I think that was one of the things it was a struggle, but I also was quite a competitive person, or like, I still probably am. And so like the challenge was also a highlight for me. I liked stepping into that kind of challenge and meeting everyone's expectations a little bit. So my first year, again, my brother had also done manu kōrero all the way through. So that was also like another live up to him sort of thing. But then it wasn't until after regional, when I went to nationals, that was the big kind of shock. Even though I'd attended them with my brother, the nationals, like actually standing on stage and interacting with the other kura, and being from Te Waipounamu, that was a huge, I don't know, it was like everyone was so interested in what it was like in Te Waipounamu, what it was like being Māori in Te Waipounamu, and so that was the same for us when me and my friends were up there. We'd usually go to the other kids and be like, what is it like? It's so different at these kura for the Māori, at those kura compared to down here. So it was a good interaction though. That was a highlight for me.
So year 10, most successful year, like
Year 9.
Year 9, sorry. And, like even in marks to win, and then, there's the count back and stuff. But what went through your mind when they called your name out as second?
I just didn't think they said my name. I think, again, that was probably a mindset that a lot of students in Te Waipounamu had, was that in a Māori category as well, Te Waipounamu students don't place. And so when they said it, I think I sat there, like everyone had to tell me again to get up. Because I was like, no, they didn't say me. I don't even think I was listening, because it didn't register that you were going to place anyway. Yeah. I just thought I was sitting on stage and couldn't wait because we were going to Rainbow's End afterwards. So that was what was going through my mind at the time. And so when they did say my name, I kind of got up and thought, oh. And I don't think it registered until afterwards what that actually meant as well. Because I think it was quite a big deal for Te Waipounamu. Well, I remember a lot of people being like, this is so big. But for me, I was like, that's cool. I really liked that I got the Whina Cooper trophy. That was probably a big thing.
You touched on it living in Te Waipounamu, your whānau aren't from Te Waipounamu, so you whakapapa into Te Ika Māori. What's it like living away from your homelands?
There's a level of, when I think of being up there or going back, or we have whānau Zooms every once a month, and so there's a level of almost shame, like not being there on the marae, or around doing the things that I do here in Te Tauihu for iwi that have looked after me and who have whāngaid me a little bit, but aren't, who I don't whakapapa to. And so there's a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame and some of that. But I also feel like I've been so looked after by the iwi. Again, I was born in Otepoti, and I think we had a really good relationship with a lot of the people from the iwi there growing up, and my dad instilled a lot of, we understood early on that there was, mana whenua, tangata whenua to these areas, and so we learnt that really early. So I think I appreciate learning how humbling that was, but I also feel saddened that we don't go back as often probably to our own marae, and for my tamariki especially.
Speaking of your tamariki, is that the reason why you chose the pathway of education for them? They've been their manupiriri of Te Kohanga Reo, their kura kaupapa Māori. Has that been a driving force in choosing that pathway? I think my experiences from kohanga and kura, I didn't even think that was, whether they go to kura or kura auraki, but it was probably my experiences transitioning from kura kaupapa to kura auraki, and some of the underlying issues I had in the kura as well, that I never wanted my tamariki to experience, and so definitely a big reason why they went through kohanga reo and kura kaupapa, and again Te Ahu Matua, it was something that I grew up in and value still, and so I wanted my tamariki to have those same experiences. We've talked about some of those issues before, and one, you've talked about your privilege around your skin colour. Can you tell me a bit about what that was like, particularly in college, for you?
I think the biggest, the most obvious scenario was my niece and I, who's our whānau, and we both know her, and the experiences she had early on with, she's a bigger girl with dark skin, and I was not, and we both, grew up in the same whānau. Of course we had different circumstances, but again, grew up in the same whānau, and the way in which she was treated at kura, at college, in comparison to me, going to the same kura, that was probably the most obvious. And I used to think, that's so, it was her, it was a her thing, that she had a bad attitude, and that's why. But thinking, as an adult, I've really reflected on that and thought, actually, in our whānau, she was loving and caring and kind, and didn't portray any of these kind of things that she was portrayed as at college, like aggressive and shouldn't be in class, and which is just totally opposite to her character. Whereas I was very assertive and could put myself in situations that I don't think back then I realised she really felt like she had the opportunities to do. So that was probably my biggest reflection back on college.
And I guess seeing those inequalities playing out in front of you, and then now being in a place of you're teaching teachers, how does that play out for you? How do you use those experiences that you had through kura to support your teaching of kaiako through the program Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori? Again, I think that my privilege, I have some privilege. I'm very approachable. I feel like, our students feel like they can approach me, and I think that my skin colour and my demeanour
is a big factor in that. And so, again, our students are, I think all of our kaiako students are, very open and really so different to the teachers that I had and probably you had. But again, I don't use that in a bad, I think I use that in a way that I can get to their level a little bit, but also share kind of the experiences that I had. And one, the big experience I did have was being fair and not wanting to be Māori and being in a kura auraki that preferred me that way. And it wasn't until I left there that I actually reconnected, I guess, with my taha Māori. And so that's probably, sharing my experiences in class, because there are so many opportunities and questions that I can do that in the class with them, and they can resonate a little bit with me on that, I think. So, yeah.
Now you are the lead teacher, sort of manager of the kaiako. What pressures are you currently feeling, or can you see in the future for your role, particularly as the program has become quite successful, over 1,000 students in 18 months. What do you sort of see some of the challenges being for you moving forward?
For me personally, transitioning into that managing sort of role would probably be the number of kaiako we have that that can teach, especially the high levels. As we get more level 1 and 2s, they of course move up into the higher levels, and being able to find kaiako that aren't already burnt out in other Reo Māori spaces. That's, I think,
you bring up a good point, because all of our kaiako, this is a side gig for them. And so what are some of the ways that you think can support that burnout? Because ultimately it's something that happens across the country. It's not just happening here. So what are some of the things do you think that may help in the future with one kaiako or two that burnout?
I think we've gone through a lot of trial and error with some of the approaches or strategies that we've had to kind of not have that burnout. I think, of course, what you get out of it is, monetarily is a big factor. And Auntie Nikki was one of the ones that has always told me, pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And so I kind of, think of that and remember that when we are pushing for our kaiako to have the right value given. I think that's a big part. But I also feel like creating spaces where they want to be, where it's easy and adaptable for them outside of their mahi, that's something that we try and aim for as well. So, yeah.
And your aspirations for the program, 2024, into 2024 is sort of the current end of the program, as we know. Hopefully in the budget announcement we get an extension. But what are your sort of hopes for the program up to 2024? I
think the biggest one that's obvious is get as many kaiako as we can through the program. That's probably whatever gets them there. I think once they're in the kaupapa, and there sometimes can be some reluctantness to come onto the kaupapa to join. But once they're there, I find that our kaiako and we provide a really informative space that they learn and grow and can reflect on their own personal growth as well. It can be for their teaching stuff, but also there's a personal level to it as well. And so I think getting as many through the kaupapa just to taste it, just to feel it, that's probably a big one of mine. But also I really hope that we can get some of our kaiako through to those high levels, like level 6, level 7, especially the ones that started from the start, that have been on this journey. Yeah, that's a big one.
Last sort of big question, what is your koha back to Te Reo Māori? You know, we talk about, particularly those of us that were fortunate enough to grow up in ko Hangareo and kura kaupapa Māori, and we received a lot. So what is your koha back to the revitalisation of Te Reo Māori?
Oh, that is a good question. I think that how I raise my tamariki is a huge one for me. How they're raised and how they will hopefully make those choices themselves to also support Te Reo Māori. I think that's like a succession almost. Yeah. That's the plan anyway. And also modelling. That I think that's a koha personally to Te Reo Māori is modelling engagement in kaupapa Māori, whether that be Te Ahu o Te Reo, kura kaupapa, at the marae. So attending and being part as many kaupapa as I can, that won't burn me out as well. And just normalising Te Reo Māori as much as possible.
Sweet. I've got a couple of quick fire questions. You have to answer them quite quickly.
Okay.
Hangi or boil up?
Hangi.
Fried bread, rewana?
Fried bread.
Ooh, I would have come with rewana. Butter, margarine?
Butter.
Cream or milk?
Oh, cream.
And then the last one, noho marae, hotel?
Oh, the hotel.
It's hard. Who wants to sleep on the floor? Hoi anō, koera ngā mahi mo tēnei rau, mihi ana ki a koe, mo tēnei wā i a tātou. It's always good to hear new perspectives and hear about the journeys that our people who are involved in the kaupapa have gone through and continue to nurture. So, e mihi ana ki a koe o te rā, kia whakairihia te tapu o ngā kōrero, te tāhu o te whare, kia puta ki te whaiau, ki te ao mā ama, te hei, hau.